On the other end of the spectrum is what's the award for the healthiest heart diet year after year after year. And although U.S. News and World Report isn't necessarily the be-all and end-all, they get a lot of attention, and they do have a panel of experts that look at this. And we'll talk now about Dr. Ornish and the Ornish diet, a real radical thinker in the 1970s who's still just a young man of 63. But it says their dieters are sure to do their heart a favor on the Ornish diet, according to experts. And if they use a rigorous version of the plan, they could actually reverse heart disease. So pretty crazy statement. Most would say, if you took a poll of most cardiologists, they would not be aware of the possibility to reverse heart disease. It's ironic they gave it the number one ranking year after year, but the picture doesn't really match the diet if you take a look at it for a minute. So they almost got it right. So Dr. Ornish's story was he's from Dallas and was an undergrad in Houston, and his parents, for reasons I don't know, started inviting a world-famous yogi into the house when he was traveling through the United States, Satchidananda. Some of you may know that name. He's passed on, but wrote many books and was quite world-famous. And young Dean Ornish got the idea that mind, body, spirit, your body, treating it well, had something to do with health. And he went on to Harvard Medical School and other training, and would periodically take a year off and do some interesting studies. And based on his experience with Satchidananda, he created a food pyramid that was vegetables, fruits, beans, legumes, whole grains, non-fat products like cereals, pretty much a Mediterranean diet without the olive oil and without the salmon, you might say, and went to test it. If you look at what was excluded, it was a lot like Lester Morrison's study, and to answer critics that those crazy people, never focused on sugar, they only focused on fat, and they missed the boat. All these diets were naturally low in sugar and were encouraged not to have any added syrups and added sugars. You're allowed to eat a piece of fruit, for God's sakes. So in the 1970s, when he was a medical student, took a year off and studied some patients with very severe CAD, is coronary artery disease. He locked them in a nice hotel. He got some funding from a local resident and showed that by feeding them this diet, and that was really the only intervention, that they were able to walk much further within just 30 days on a treadmill. These were serious heart patients. The number of chest pain episodes they were having dropped significantly, and he even was able to arrange pre- and post-stress tests on these people and their ability to perform and demonstrate better blood flow. This is radical, crazy, insane stuff in the 1970s. This is actually just at the time that balloon angioplasty was coming on board. Very, very few people were aware of the data. But he was already publishing with good people. Dr. Ornish was unknown, but Anthony Gatto, the second author, is a very, very well-known researcher worldwide. And then due to some criticisms of that experience, which were maybe this was all placebo. You lock people in a hotel, you're giving them food, you're giving them attention, you're drawing their blood, they must be loving all this research experience. Maybe it's placebo. What about a control group? He had to step up the game a bit and had to get significantly more funding out of some financiers. The Enron Corporation was one of the biggest donors, so although they're not always loved for everything that they did, of course, they were able to be charitable towards this research project. And he designed a study where he looked at this in a randomized way. Some patients who got his program, and by this point he had extended it to include a mind-body component where there was stress management. Patients were taught meditation. Patients were asked to walk. Of course, they were all asked to not smoke. I know the names on this list don't mean much to you, but again, Dr. Ornish was able to gather some of the most prominent researchers in the country as his co-authors, so this was accepted into the finest of journals and should have been a real tidal wave through the world in terms of its impact. So he looked at this first 1 year and then 5-year randomized controlled trial of very, very severely diseased heart patients who were asked either to go through his Ornish intensive lifestyle program of largely plant-based, no added oil, whole food, no added sugar diets, or allowed to just follow along with whatever their cardiologist recommended. In terms of some of the numbers, LDL cholesterol in the control group at one year was 157, but it had fallen again. It's very common nowadays to hear amongst naysayers that diet does not impact your blood cholesterol. But in this group, blood cholesterol fell 60 points in 1 year by changing your diet. More radical were these words that say progression or regression, because what Dr. Ornish built into the study was all these people had a heart catheterization, analyzed very sophisticated measures by a computer, and they agreed to have that done again at 1 year and 5 years, even if they didn't need it. It was part of the study. So regression means, in the experimental group, if you eat, if you manage stress, if you walk, and you meet with Dr. Ornish for a year, 82% of the time your arteries showed less blockage. First time that arrow started to go the opposite direction. We knew from Lester Morrison it seemed to have an impact in terms of death, and that's a pretty good marker. But Dr. Morrison didn't have the catheterization data. From Walter Kempner, we had some experience with people's electrocardiograms and other things improving. But this was by far the first time that what cardiologists consider the gold standard. Are your arteries getting more blocked with time, which almost always happen? Your arteries getting less blocked with time. It was demonstrated 82% showed improvement. That triangle is a change in narrowing, change in stenosis. On average, at the end of the year, arteries were 2% less blocked on the Ornish program and 3% more blocked. And though those don't sound like stunning numbers, Mom, my 60% blockage is now 58%. But arteries are 4R squared pipes, so just a small change in the radius can be a big change in the amount of area that blood can go through. And it instantly translated into a major improvement in the way these people were feeling. Dr. Ornish went on to publish the 5-year follow-up data. Everybody had this repeat catheterization and assessment. And this remains, again, one of the most stunning figures in cardiology history and treatment, but it's largely ignored. So let me go through it. It says on the bottom, baseline 1 year and 5 years. That's when these catheterizations measured by a computer, totally objective, wasn't somebody just who might have some bias and might say the numbers were better or worse. And on the y-axis is the amount of narrowing. At the beginning of the study, both these groups were 41% blocked on average. So there's all these measurements that are making those average. The group in the black circles were the group that was told just follow with your own cardiologist. So what happens, at least in the 1980s, when you're seeing a cardiologist getting very good care in San Francisco area and other areas, you get worse. And that's, I would certainly offer you the chance that it's almost certainly the same thing today, that standard cardiology care, arteries tend to get worse with time. So it went from 41 to 42 to 52% block. And the remarkable and amazing finding was it got better with the Ornish heart disease reversal program, using both food and stress management and love and group support and walking, so that the arteries were less blocked at the end of 5 years. Of more impressive nature, perhaps, to insurance and regulators was the fact, I just want you to look at the last line that says any events 25 and 45. This was at the end of 5 years. 45 of the people in the control group, 45%, had gone on to have a death, a heart attack, a bypass, a balloon angioplasty. 25 in the Ornish experimental group. That's dropping it by about 40 to 50%. That caught the eye of insurance people who said, if this is a therapy that drops the need for, death is not expensive. Death is a non-event for an insurance company. But hospitalization, bypass, and angioplasty are expensive events, that perhaps this is a kind of therapy that should be reimbursed. Well, it actually took from 1998 till 2010, but this was the announcement by our government, Medicare, CMS, the M is for Medicare, that both the Ornish program and the Pritikin program I showed you would now be covered for Medicare patients with heart disease who are looking to stabilize and reverse their heart disease. These are the only two programs. There is no and I'm not really knocking on anything. There is no paleo approved program. There's no Mediterranean diet approved program. Both these programs are either 98, 99% plant-based, no added oil, 10% of calories from fat. They're kind of countercultural to the covers of Time magazine and the rest that we see nowadays, but they are the only programs because the data was so large that, the things we care about, not ending up in an emergency room, not having expensive and maybe disfiguring procedures, and certainly an inkling that actual survival was improved. So usually these are programs that are at hospitals that have had an interest. There's about 50 Pritikin programs and about 50 Ornish programs around the country. Could be at a hospital in your community. Usually it's called intensive cardiac rehab, and they're really a wonderful way for people with heart disease to add to their standard therapy and get an opportunity to learn and then implement actual strategies. Sort of, I call it low-tech, high-fiber, because it's not very glitzy and fancy compared to a laser or a proton accelerator, but this is the real deal of learning the importance of lifestyle, and certainly the importance of food. We could have learned it in 1913 from Anichkov, could have learned it in 1940s from Morrison, but it took till 2010, and it's largely ignored. I mean, we all know that. It's not sexy, it's not as profitable as putting in a stent, but it is the real deal. Now, I could go on and on and on about a few of these people, but I just wanted to, it's critically important that we have every opportunity to educate when we can. Dr. Ornish did continue to do these studies and follow up, and has a research institute in Sausalito, California that's still very active. He's still a young man and very engaged in all this. But he got very interested in prostate cancer with the question, if I can reverse heart disease with a lifestyle program that emphasizes whole food, plant-based, low added oil, no added sugar kind of diets with stress management, can I actually impact cancer? So he was able to get 93Me, it's actually men, who the urologist had said, you really don't need radiation or prostatectomy right now. There are many men that are advised, well, just watch your prostate cancer. Half of them entered his program like they were heart patients. They were not heart patients, they were prostate cancer patients. And half were told, just follow up with your urologist. This stuff was done with, again, he gathered some of the best cancer scientists in the world to be his co-authors. At the end of a year, this blood measurement called the PSA went down if you stop eating dairy and meat and eggs and start eating more fruits, vegetables, grains without added oil. The PSA went up in the group that was being watched, which usually is what happened. One of the phenomenal findings was that you can actually make your blood like chemotherapy without chemotherapy, that if you take the blood of somebody eating Dr. Ornish's lifestyle program, drip it on prostate cancer cells, it has 8 times the power of killing prostate cancer cells compared to the control group. That took only 3 months, so you could radically change the ability of your immune system to actually kill prostate cancer cells. And then in a field that we now call epigenetics, one of the most interesting fields in the last dozen years, is that if you measure the activity of genes that are involved in controlling cancer, there are certain genes that promote cancer, genes that fight cancer, that within 3 months of adopting the Ornish diet, there were 48 genes that fight cancer that were shown to turn on simply by changing diet, lifestyle, stress management, and over 450 genes that are involved in promoting cancer that turned off. That, some people call it nutrigenomics, the food you eat affecting the activity of your genes, or epigenetics, that there's things even more important than your genetic structure, that your lifestyle can dictate to your genes. Your genes load the gun, your lifestyle pulls the trigger, is a common statement. And, this was done with a woman named Elizabeth Blackburn, PhD at UCSF. She went on to win the Nobel Prize in medicine. So, you just don't see, there is no other dietary plan other than this plan where this kind of impact on genetic activity has been shown. So again, I'm open to the idea that there are many healthy eating styles that may promote good health, and I'm aware that in Crete they eat a high-fat, polyunsaturated fat diet and they seem to be healthy, and in Japan they eat a non-fat diet and they're healthy. But if you want to follow the pattern of science, this is the only dietary style that has been shown to affect genetic activity in a positive way, certainly for prostate cancer. And for those of us that don't want to get old too quick, don't want to get too wrinkled, don't want to suffer some chronic debilitating diseases, Dr. Ornish went on again with Elizabeth Blackburn, now Nobel laureate, to look at activities of your telomere, length of your telomere, the tips of your chromosome that may dictate the rate at which your cells are aging. If you have long telomeres, you're probably doing better than short telomeres. And if you look at the blue bar, patients that were engaged in the Ornish lifestyle program, healthy diet, physical activity, stress management, social support, at the end of 5 years, they actually had longer telomeres than at the baseline. And that in a control group that were just followed for 5 years, the natural progression is your telomere, the tips of your chromosomes get shorter. So there's at least an inkling that one of the best anti-aging programs, it may not be a $500 vial of cream, may not be some new age therapy. It may be cucumbers and peppers and radishes and walking and socialization and laughter and kind of the essential connectivity that's part of Dean Ornish's program. And it's really radical because there is not another dietary style that we have this kind of data from such quality people.